All right, we are live. Ooh, it seems like it's been a long time since we've done one of these. I'm going to let people start cycling in for a second before I get into the important stuff. It's all important. All right, first thumbs up of the night. Thank you very much. Got 12 people. All right, they're cycling in. Like I said a minute ago, it feels like it's been a long time since we've done one of these, and a lot has happened in the last month. So it's been good, but action packed. Hey, Christopher. Hope you're not too cold. Had one of the guys comment on our videos and said they had about 10 inches of snow, and one guy said it was 73 degrees today and the pollen coming in. So it's pretty crazy. It's nice getting to talk to so many different people. That way I can not feel as bad and jealous all in the same day. Hey, Adam, thanks for being there. It was a blast. It was really special. So someone said they can't hear me. Is everybody else hearing me? I imagine you are, or I'd have more people. Hey, Byron, how's it going? All right, so we've got a good bit of people in here. I'm going to go ahead and run through a couple things really quick, primarily the test yard, and then we'll go from there into questions and answers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, thanks for the comment on the cover for the chair. That was a gift from my sister-in-law. And it actually is pretty nice. And this is a Dirt Rooster shirt right here. So Randy, I was able to meet him the beginning of the month, and it was great. He's a really nice guy. He's just, well, he's a lot taller than I am. Most people are, though. It was fun. He's a fun guy to be around. That's one thing I really enjoyed the most. There's a lot of fun people at the conference. Anyways, so we're all gearing up for, I say big year, but some of us it might just be keeping what we have and doing better with it. And that's kind of what our goal is for this year. I'm not planning on going to like 600 colonies and doubling or any crazy insane number. We plan to increase to a degree so we can offer more nucleus colonies and things into the future than what we have been, but we want to not grow so quickly that we overshoot our headlights or we're not being as efficient as possible. My goal right now is efficiency and really taking care of my bees as best as I possibly can. Part of that, I think I'm going to be able to do better after I've gone through this experimental yard for the first year because I'm really wanting to switch more towards natural beekeeping as far as the treatments go, especially. And of course, everyone has their own definition on what natural means. But I'm talking about like oxalic acid treatments, thymol, Formic, and I really didn't want to do the Formic at first. I've been encouraged by some of the speakers at the conference and other people as well to give Formic another shot and try it a little bit differently. So I'll be consulting some people who are more familiar with the product. Probably go with Formic Pro. And then I'm going to have 4 different groups. So the test yard, for those of you who don't know, will be comprised of 52 colonies. It was originally 50, but in order to break it into 4 groups, each a group of 13, we needed to have 52 colonies. So thankfully, we are going to have 4 groups of 13, and one will be dedicated towards formic acid. One will be dedicated towards Apigard, which is a thymol product. And one will be dedicated towards what I'm most curious about, honestly, is oxalic acid with a brood break combination. And that'll be 2 treatments of oxalic acid. I really feel like it's a soft treatment and maybe it needs 2. And see out of those 3, which one gives us the best control. Hopefully we can get multiple treatments to give us the control that we need. We'll be doing frequent alcohol washes throughout, and we will be showing those in videos. So for some people who are really wanting, at the end of the year, I'll sum it up so people can kind of figure out what happened. But for those who really want the nitty-gritty details, there will be a lot of detailed videos, a lot of minutes to watch, but I think it'll be worth it. I'm excited to see what we find out. And the other group will be the control group. Yeah, Christian, I've had bad experiences with Formic as well, and I've never had a good experience with it. But there's a few techniques and products out there to try. So a lot of people are really interested in it because of the organic aspects of formic acid. So we're going to give it a shot, and maybe the experiment will prove to a lot more people why they shouldn't use it. We'll see how that goes. And then, of course, the control group will be no mite treatments until probably the first week of September. And then we'll do alcohol washes, see how much they've built up. And then we will have to really knock them back, and it'll weaken the colony significantly. We know that if we let them go, there's going to be major losses. But anyways, let's see. Watching from the UK. And oh, by the way, GRS Trans, thank you so much for the $5 donation to that experimental yard that we're putting in. We really appreciate that. Let me break this down as quickly as I can, then we'll get to questions and answers and start going from there. So, first of all, we have two sponsors. And a sponsor is someone who has donated either in product or in monetary means over $1,000. So I want to say a big thank you to Good Job Bees out of the Big Island of Hawaii. I'm actually fixing to do some videos on Good Job Bees. They let me do some videos, which is great. And then Apame as well, which did not donate the entire test set, but they knocked a significant amount of price off of the product so we could have an insulated side of the test as well. So still, all things put together, I've calculated down to the feed, down to the treatments, down to the weed barriers, hive stands, the entire thing. And buying new bees, because I don't want to be using my own for this test, because if I do that, then that's 52 nucleus colonies that I can't sell to customers, and I already have more demand than I have supply. So we'll be purchasing bees. So all that together is $16,600. It's a lot of money, but we have raised, between the sponsors and you all, and I was able to get a small grant. We are over 60% funded, and it's actually pretty close to 70%, which is amazing. And I've got some folks who are actually talking about maybe donating some folks that make equipment who are thinking about donating wooden boxes, and we can show their nice equipment off in the video. So anyways, that's what's going on with that. I'm really excited to see that test, especially the treatment side, but also the insulated versus non-insulated, because half will be insulated, half will not be. Yes, thanks again, GRS Trans. And if you have a question, hit me with it. All right, Syntex Prepper, thanks for doing these chats. I've learned so much from your channel. Thank you so much. If you have a question, leave it below. All right, so people have been asking about my trip in Hawaii. Let me sum that up really quick, because I know a lot of people are going to ask. It was great. It was beautiful. We didn't do a lot of beekeeping stuff. We did do a few videos, as you have seen. I've got a really cool one on wax rendering. The technique really helps you get like 99.9% of the wax away from the slum gum. I'm really excited about that video. And I was really appreciative of Zach and David, who both did videos with me in Hawaii, because they did a lot of the speaking in the videos, and it's not that easy to just, they were dealing, with, not being familiar with it, and they did a really good job. So thanks to them. There was blue whales there. I tried lots of different types of honey. The fruits were amazing. It was t-shirt and shorts weather, but it was crazy. I mean, there were people in jackets. It would drop down to like 72 degrees, 70 degrees. And the Hawaiians were just all bundled up. Like, oh man, it's cold today. I'm like I'm sweating. I'm perspiring through my shirt. And of course, it got in the 80s some days. So it was fun. It was nice to be able to recharge, because we've been pretty overwhelmed since about Thanksgiving with everything, the conference and all the other stuff. So it was a great trip, wonderful trip. And I've got a couple short videos that I'm going to post that are just kind of not really beekeeping, just kind of fun. So you might look out for that if you're interested. Yeah, I took Laurel this time. It wasn't really an option. And well, Sarah, I have raised a lot of money for the experimental yard, but people like you have donated quite often, and it really adds up when we all work on this together. And it's mind blowing. I'm really shocked, and but there's a lot of people that are excited about it, and I'm think I'm the most excited. I really am. We're gonna really take the time, and I can afford to take the time now to figure these things out. So that's the goal. And I'll be talking to other beekeepers who know more than I do to help make sure we do this right. Didn't take the kids. Hey, Bruce H., thank you very much for the $25 donation. We appreciate that very much. If you have a question, hit me with it. Hey, Justin, so how do I tell what my bees died from? Well, there's ways to do an autopsy. Pictures really would help more than anything. Describing it might be able to help me know what's going on, but pictures do speak 1,000 words, especially multiple pictures of different angles on colonies' death report, so to speak. And usually if I can see things pretty well, it's pretty easy for me to determine what it is. When raising queens, is it possible to get well-mated queens with only a few hives? And the answer is yes, but it depends on how many you're doing. Many new queen raisers, they're a little hesitant for multiple reasons. First of all, it's because of the grafting, which really isn't that bad. The grafting isn't as bad as actually setting up the starter right. And one of the other things is also, do I have enough drones? Well, if you're not putting any drone colonies out and you're raising hundreds, it's an issue. If you're raising a couple dozen or even a little bit more than that throughout the season and you don't have any drone colonies out, unless you're just in a really bad area for bees, there should be some drones out there. It doesn't take that many drones, and there are some, bees in trees, whether they're wild or not, they might have just swarmed from your hives or somebody else's last year. You probably have some neighbors that you don't know about with bees. And, so unless you're just raising a bunch, I really wouldn't worry about designated drone colonies out there. Now, if you're in Africanized bee territory, that could be an issue, though. They could go out there and get a couple Africanized drone genetics in there, and that would not be fun. All right. Hey, Kamon, love your Hawaii vids. Been watching some of your old videos. When do you start feeding syrup in spring, and what ratio do you use? Well, it depends on what I need to do with it. If the colony needs a lot of poundage, like we didn't get enough in them in September or early October, then I'm going to do a 2-to-1 because we want to get poundage on there. If they're extremely light, get that thick syrup on there. But if you're just trying to stimulate the bees with the pollen patty conjunction, then something like a 1-to-1 can work. It depends on where you're at. I mean, if you're up in northern Michigan and you're doing it when I'm doing it, it might be a really big disaster. I don't know a lot about northern timings. I do know here I can do it in February on a really warm little stretch, but it's not essential to do it. My main concern is that the bees have enough foodstuffs, but it can stimulate them and help keep them clean and everything. Whoa, that was trippy right there. Wow, Chip, thank you so much. You've been a great donator in the past, and if you guys make sure, and gals, put some questions with these if you have them. It pops right on up. But yeah, I like the thinner feed. If you're just trying to clean the bees' guts and their systems out, or just stimulate them, 1-to-1 really is better. And this is the way I look at it. Let's say we have a really nice cluster, and it is 8, 12, 15 frames strong, and if it's in late February, I can have almost a solid double deep on a good production colony. And we feed that colony half a gallon, 3/4, even a gallon of 1-to-1. It's not like they're taking that and they're storing a bunch of it for the long term. They consume a lot of food, a lot. And so they're just gonna burn right through that. Even if we get a cold stretch, it'll be fine. They'll get that in their systems. and they'll just eat most of that right away. Now, if you're putting on tons of it, that could be a problem. So maybe just a little bit to stimulate them. I use it more as a tool of cleansing their guts. If there's anything in their gut that shouldn't be, it just helps cleanse their guts, just like a nectar flow. Not as good as nectar, but it's the best tool we have. So Kenny Howard and Kenneth Dutton, that was what was a little trippy. I was like, whoa, someone accidentally double donated. But wow, guys, I really appreciate that so much. And obviously that's going straight to the experimental yard. Roll Tide, wasn't that, I mean, this has just been the awesome month, the most awesome month ever. We've had a national championship and so many other things happen. It's been great. Thank you guys so much for the donation. How can I get pics to you? Justin, you can send messages to tennesseesbees@gmail.com. I will say, though, I'm backed up on emails by probably 30 to 40 right now, and it's nobody's fault but mine. I just can't seem to keep up. Hey, Farmstead Smith, I hope you guys are doing good in Oregon. Already got some red maple bloom, and that's what we're looking forward. And a lot of people ask, when am I going to start feeding pollen patties and sugar syrup and all that kind of stuff? Well, the pollen patties are going to go on whenever, right before or right when we see some maple pollen. I really have never noticed a huge advantage for me to feed bees pollen patties when it's not kind of working in conjunction with a little bit of the natural stuff. I've tried and I've tried, but I don't really see a whole lot of benefit for the effort, the labor, and the money that goes into it. So Kenny Howard says, any tips for remote apiaries, setting one up this year? So I actually get this question quite a bit. How do I get more bee yards? What do I need to look for? And this has been a tremendous learning curve for me. One of the things that I believe in doing first is obviously, if you know people who are willing to let you do it, having a relationship with someone already is a big plus, because you know typically what to expect with their attitudes. And then if you're looking for places, you don't know anybody in that area, then farmers, it's definitely the best place to start. No offense to any city people, but farmers are used to getting splinters, getting cut by barbed wire, getting kicked by cows, dealing with stinging insects and biting ants and all kinds of stuff. So they're usually more forgiving if somebody gets stung. Obviously, try to keep your bees away from households. I don't put my bees within usually at least 100 yards to somebody's house. I try to put it even further than that. So we got a Michael Palmer on here. What I would like to know, is it the Michael Palmer or is it Michael Palmer? And no offense either way, but yeah, I'm kind of a fan of the Vermont Michael Palmer, just a little bit. Anyways, back to the bee yard questions. Oh, so I usually either pay. Say what? I usually Michael Palmer. Is there another? There's actually a lot of Michael Palmers in the United States. Michael was a very popular name there it still is a pretty popular name. Not a whole lot of Kamons though. So I usually pay the folks, I give them options. The folks that I put bees on their property, I either offer $100 a year in rent, which really is not that bad of a price for a good production yard. Or two, I will give them 2 gallons of honey bottled. I usually don't put labels on it or anything like that. And I've never had anybody take the money. They always go for the honey. And that works good for us and it works good for them. I want to give them something because they have a vested interest in my success and having my bees there. Farmers are typically more open to it as well, and also usually appreciate the pollination, depending on the type of the farmers that you're dealing with. So that's kind of what I do. I love talking to guys at the farmers co-ops, and I sell my honey at farmers co-ops and extension agent offices and all kinds of stuff, because that just gets me out there to all these farmers. So it really has made it a lot easier for me to get into bee yards for sure and get new ones. Is there So now I'm wondering if this is the real Michael Palmer. It is the real Michael Palmer, but Vermont Michael Palmer. Somebody help me. All right. How many times could you split an established hive if you're strictly producing honey without compromising it? Prospect, Tennessee. I've been through there. So it depends on how strong they are coming out of winter, obviously. Depends on a lot of things, but I always split my production colonies once before the flow. Not like a major split, but enough to make about 3 frames of bees. A good frame of capped brood, a partial frame of uncapped brood larvae, and of course the adhering bees on that. And then I'll give them a frame of food with a little bit more bees, and I'll take that right, but a little before the honey flow starts. This is really to curb swarming as much as anything, but also gets me a split. I probably do lose a little bit of honey production compared to really trying to keep it all together and trying to keep them from swarming. But I find that it's better for me to do it this way because I always lose swarms if I just let them stay full strength. And also, I sell nukes and queens and stuff. So I'm making money in other ways. But you could split it then. I usually wait till after the honey flow is almost towards the end, and then I'll split it again. We're looking at late May. And so that's 2 splits right there. You have the original colony. And if it's in good shape, honestly, you could break it down in three ways. And then, or you could just split it in half and maybe build them up and then split them again in fall. Now, you can be more intense than this, but a lot depends on what you're going for. I like to run nice clusters into winter. And if you're wanting a bunch of 3 frame clusters, obviously you could split it harder than that. But I prefer bigger colonies typically. But I'm tinkering around with a few smaller colonies. So, do you know meat? Uh, I I know Martha too. Right, right. It's cold in Vermont, that's for sure. I'm wondering if our resident local Michael Palmer fan is going to show up tonight as well. We got several guys in Tennessee who really are starting to use those split nuke boxes. I'm sure they are all over the place. How quickly can a nuke fill a deep and be ready to split? Well, all depends on the queen of the nuke, what the nuke looks like, because I have purchased nukes from years ago that were absolute garbage and never filled up a deep. And then I've made some myself and purchased a couple that will fill out the rest of the deep in just a week to 10 days. So it's a fine line producing nukes, because if you produce good ones, they're just a handful of days away from swarming. And if then you get a little early and they look weak to the customer. So nuke production can be a little tricky. You can do it. I mean, just good bees grow fast in spring. But I mean, a good healthy nuke is going to fill out a deep pretty quickly, but I'm not going to just split it again right there. I usually like to let them get past a deep size before I split it. Do you treat every hive for mites in winter? No washes. Yes, I do. I treat every hive with oxalic acid vapor because I do know they have some. And since this is a business, I've got to try to get those mites as low as possible. And oxalic acid is very inexpensive. We have more free time to a degree in winter, so it's worth getting out there doing 2 rounds of oxalic acid vapor in winter while the bees are broodless, and cleaning up those mites as much as possible. And the time it would take me to do washes, it's counterproductive productive because I could have just treated, and also I'm killing winter bees, which are kind of important. It looks like it is Michael Palmer. So, anyways, oh, there's no honey in this tea. Goodness, this is a crime. Could you put a little honey in there? Thanks, Laurel. A bee pun. Jason, I don't remember what numbers. I have it written down off the top of my head. I can't remember what the breeder numbers were on the queens I got from Michael Palmer. I can say that they do really well, and those were the first carnies that I started using, and I'm not sure they're 100% carnies, but they have what I would call more carny-like genetics. When I think of a carny, I think of a bee that is not going to brood haphazardly, that is going to get broodless in winter. It's going to keep a smaller cluster, and when the time is right and the nutrition is available, they're going to really take off, as opposed to some Italians that I've had that try to raise brood in December here, and I don't like that. And I think looking long term for my business, can you turn that heater off? It's so much more advantageous to have bees that go broodless in winter. The varroa mites are a problem. It's a great time to get a hold of in winter. But let's think about this. There's the tropolapsis mite. Dr. Samuel Ramsey talks about this. There's other people that have been talking about it. It's something that we should think about. If you read a history book, we're gonna get some more invasive species over here at some point. I hope we don't. Chances are we will. So the tropolapsis mite biggest weakness is brood breaks. They can't handle it like varroa mites can. That means I want bees that are already more prone towards brood breaks. That's going to be part of my strategy going forward. Kamon, in your observations after oxalic acid treatments, have you seen bees with burnt antennas or hairs burned off from the acid? And yes, you can get that if they're really close to where it's jetting out. I recommend, and what we do is we have someone go ahead and, excuse me, blow some smoke in the entrance or near where we're going to be jetting in that oxalic acid and push those bees away. I've never seen any effect of just the bees in general are burnt from the oxalic acid. It's just the ones that are really close to that hot oxalic acid coming out. So, blowing some smoke in there does a couple of things. First, it kind of gets them away. Yeah, Michael, everyone will want to move their bees north once tropolapsis gets here. That's kind of my thoughts. Thankfully, in Tennessee, we get enough winter. I think it will be helpful, but it just makes me think, what is it going to be like in southern Florida, Georgia, California, Texas? I hope it doesn't get over here. Oh, I didn't. I missed that one. And this one's but as far as the oxalic acid, the only burned bees I ever see are the ones that get too close. So that smoke goes in there, gets those bees back, and it also kind of breaks the cluster a little bit as well, helping that oxalic acid get in there. But I don't find oxalic acid very helpful unless there's a brood break going on. And that's why we're in this experimental yard. We are going to be creating brood breaks in summer and seeing this. This is not mainly for commercial beekeepers. It's mainly for beekeepers who, I mean, some professionals actually do make brood breaks and say it works really good, but this is primarily for backyard beekeepers who want those natural treatments, but to make them very effective. So their bees are healthy, nothing's contaminated, and those mites are fried. All right, I missed this one up there. Thank you so much for the $15 donation, P. Grace. I'm very interested in your testing the different mite controls. I'm a new beekeeper starting this year, and the whole process of mite control is somewhat confusing. It is confusing. I've been doing this 17 years, and it's still confusing because some of the products aren't working like they should. There's several products out there. A lot of times we trust these products, or we listen to a local beekeeper and they probably think that it works. I'm not blaming local beekeepers necessarily, but we're all bad at sometimes of getting biased. A lot of times we're bad about making assumptions without actually having proof. And what we need in this industry is consistency on controlling the varroa mites. If by and large beekeepers from the hobby level all the way up could get consistent low mite loads, whether that's a combination of natural strategies and artificial, brood breaks, and a natural treatment, whatever, consistency, low mite loads, we would see a huge difference in how many bees survived every year. Formic acid has been a pain. Apivar is one that I'm really concerned about. I know beekeepers who have a couple thousand colonies who have been using it for several years who are not using it anymore because it's not knocking the mites back like it used to. I tested it as well this year. Oxalic acid, I tested that the year before. 5 rounds of oxalic acid for me in summer was a waste of energy. That wasn't good enough. The Apivar this year was good about holding the mites where they were, but it didn't give me a uniform knockback in my apiaries. And this was with alcohol washes before, alcohol washes after. And I'd been kind of suspicious about it, but it's supposed to be one of the more reliable products. And it's expensive, so it should work, right? And then I'm talking to guys like Bob Benny, and other beekeepers as well, who are having some of the similar issues. And it's a problem. We really need Apivar and other companies to make sure their products actually do what they say that they're going to. Fat chance, high demand, and they don't really have a lot of competition. A 2-mile apiary limit. Okay, that's interesting to know. Nova Scotia, Canada. I have 4 hives and I want to make more. Should I learn to graft, or is it easier to just split? If you can get some good queens from somebody up there, then you can just split and have some queens ready to go. And especially because you have such a short season, whenever you make your splits, it's ideal to have a queen just to put in there and she can be laying within a matter of a few days, as opposed to walk away splits, which I'm not a huge fan of, or even dropping cells. Cells are pretty good though. I personally love raising my own queens. I feel like I just have so much more control. I can have more queens than what I need, and you can always sell the extras. And then also you can select. And it's not like I get like Brother Adam crazy about selecting for my queens, but you don't have to be better than a lot of the commercial garbage that is out there. All you have to do, I mean, especially on the hobby level, is just select from your nice colonies that don't headhunt you around the bee yard, that perform the way that you like, that obviously survived winter, and now you're already way ahead of the game. So I really love the control that raising queens can get you, and you can have a 5-frame nuke like I have in my videos, and you can make a handful of queens, and if that's all you need, then you're set. We're going to be tinkering around with Bob Benny on those 2-day queen cells this year, and man, I am excited about that. I think it could be helpful for me, but I think it could be really helpful for you all as well in producing queens faster and still having quality. Bob and I are going to be collaborating together and see if we can figure out a method that's going to be beneficial for both of our operations. Hey, Joe, I have not had any experience with the Nicot queen rearing kit. I really haven't. I know just enough to be dangerous. Have you tried oxalic acid dribble with glycerin? I have not. I've only tried it with the sugar syrup. But next time I try it, it will be with vegetable glycerin because the bees don't want to eat that as opposed to the sugar syrup solution. Yeah, Apivar is not performing for a lot of people, and there are scientists who are testing it out and finding that the concentration levels of the active ingredient are below threshold on some of the strips. Let's see here. So at what point do you check hives to see if they are mite resistant? That's where the washes come in. Randy Oliver has come up with a system for mini hives. Randy has come up for a system for his mini hives, but he hasn't figured it out yet. And there's several things. I like Randy Oliver. I've learned a lot from him, but there's also been some things that he's been wrong about in the past. And I promise you, there's going to be some things on here that I'm wrong about. I've already done that. So we try to be as helpful as possible. I'm kind of seeing what Randy does with all that treatment free, hopefully getting some bees that are treatment free. I think there is room for growth, but can that translate easily across the board once he develops that? And can he sustain that? It's a complicated process, and I'm anxious to see the things that he has to say about it long term. But I do know with his oxalic acid towels and other things that he's done. There are some issues there because other people have tested them and they haven't worked for them. Bob Benny said at our conference that he donated 200 hives to the oxalic acid shop towel method Randy Oliver is pushing, and he got no live bees back from that test. So obviously there's more work to do there. I hope that we can make significant progress, and Randy Oliver can do that. But they've been trying to make significant progress since before I was born on Varroa. It's a complicated problem. Doesn't mean we should give up, but we all don't need to just jump in real quick with, oh, this type of bee is super special. Stick your toe in the water, buy a couple, try it out, do alcohol washes, check and make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to. Verify for yourself. It's complicated. Trust me, I've got thousands of dollars that have been essentially thrown on a bonfire to prove it. To myself, anyways. Where's that tan from in Hawaii? Well, I mean, it's still, wintertime there. And this screen, the extra lighting I have back there makes me look more pasty than what I really am. Laurel's like, sure it does. Yeah, I plan on having queens for sale this spring. I do. I want super bees too. Someone needs to send me some free right now. So Justin Mitchell asks, if I buy a 5-frame nuke and a queen, could I get 2 hives from it? Can you put more honey in that? Definitely needs more. Like double. So I don't see a whole lot of reasoning in taking a 5-frame nuke, even if it's a good one that's packed, and breaking it down in half, because you haven't even come close to touching the queen's full potential. A queen can totally lay up and take care of a whole deep brood chamber. So if she's not able to do that, doesn't have the bee power to do that, then she's not laying to her full capacity. So if you have essentially 5 frames, or let's say 6 to make it even, 3 over here, 3 over here, and 2 great queens, you're only getting a fraction of their potential. I don't like splitting colonies that aren't a deep or bigger. Unless I have, unless I'm doing it for queen rearing or I need it or something like that. But there's really not, if you're trying to actually grow numbers and draw more foundation and do a lot of things. Personally, I think let them get a little bit bigger first. Let it get to at least a good solid deep, size, and then break it in half or something like that. Myself. Is honey vegan? If it's not, it should be. I mean, that's a huge conversation, but I don't see how anyone even can make the argument on, being vegan is more natural. All you have to do is observe nature. And if you go to the wrong parts of the world, nature will eat you for dinner, and you are definitely not a vegetable. Well, I don't know. We have some vegetables in this country. Oh, man, I'm going to get in trouble with the vegan crowd now. I stay in trouble all the time. Farmstead Smith, I missed that question about early spring treatment preference. Maybe if someone could point that out. And hey, Laurel, could you run out to the car and get that thing that's in there? I really need that. Yeah, it is in the green car. I needed Laurel to go grab something for me. Let's see. I bought a couple Apame hives to try while at your conference. Looking forward to checking them out. Yeah. Oh, you got to watch this. Okay. Brian, man, what do you? Well, thanks very much. Thank you very much for the donation to our experimental yard. We really appreciate you. I hope you do well. Let me know if I can answer any questions for you, buddy. Okay, Kamon, they asked, what do I treat with in early spring? They are in your location. Okay, so what's my early treatment? I don't really have, it depends on what you call early. So I treat with oxalic acid vapor in wintertime and basically get the Varroa mites down to as close to zero as I can. That's my early treatment. I don't treat again until June when I pull the honey supers. And that works good for me. But I've got to get a good knockback in June. I need to get over 80%, and then I'm going to treat again in August. And it's constantly keeping those mites low. It's really important, and it seems like a lot of work, and it is. It's the hugest pain in the butt that we experience every year. I can't imagine what it'd be like without Varroa. I'm kind of glad I don't know because it'd probably be so sick to my stomach. But they are a huge pain. So we don't worry about anything prior to that. Now, and somebody else might need to. If you're already brooding heavily now, like in some places that are starting to brood, you might need a treat before June. That's why you have to adjust this to your location. What would you recommend for mite treatment if your supers don't come off that early? Well, maybe you don't need to treat that early for your area. I don't know when your bees start brooding up. You could use Formic. I mean, but someone mentioned maybe that Hop Guard 3 might be legal. I don't think it is. I don't have to check into that one. Not that it probably works that good. But, Formic Pros and Max and Mite Away Quick Strips, they can kind of be rough on bees. So that's one of the issues that a lot of people run into is that they need to treat, but they're still producing honey. See, it's for me, once June rolls around, I'm pretty much done with honey production for the year. So it's all about keeping the bees healthy, eliminating mites, making some splits periodically, that kind of stuff. Yeah, thymol is you can't use it legally with honey supers on. Oxalic acid is the same way. You can't do it legally. You cannot do that. Let's see here. So it was really fascinating to see in Hawaii the bees already bringing in nectar in January. It was really sickening to a degree. Now that, but still, they're not going full throttle though. Just because there's nectar and pollen coming in, they are brooding up, and it's a pretty decent bit. But the brood patterns. If you watch the videos I did with Zach, they're still not full throttle, and a lot of that has to do with day length and time of the year, and there's just it that affects the plants, and the plants obviously are tied at the hip with the honeybees. Laurel does not believe in putting near as much honey in tea as I do. If it is not like you can taste what flower the tea is in the tea, then it's not sweet enough. But I was after 10 years of marriage. I mean, we still need to work on concentration levels of honey in foods. Let's see. Waldman's question. Let's see. So Waldcraft says a lot of my friends are using styrofoam hive boxes. What are your thoughts on this? Greens from Washington State. So I believe what you're referring to is the polystyrene hives, which looks very similar to styrofoam. It's just way stronger. And I do have a couple of those, and the bees are doing well in both of those hives. Personally, the number one thing is the quality of bees going into winter. It doesn't matter what hive you have. It could be a $10,000 one. They won't overwinter good if they're not healthy, but they seem to be working really good. One of the biggest issues I have with them is they're nice and lightweight, but I don't like kind of how soft they are. I feel like if I dropped it with a bunch of honey in it, it's just going to crack like an egg. And I've heard from other beekeepers that it can. Some people still think it's worth it though because of the insulative benefits. I think they work good, but there's pros and cons to everything you use. And that's one of the cons about it. The bees seem to do really well. They're not going to rot on you. You need to make sure they're painted though, because the sunlight, the UV will wear them out. I think they're fine. It's not as strong as a wooden box. And the Apame hives that are insulated, they are they are insulated, not quite as much as the polystyrene ones are. Polystyrenes usually are, I believe, a R rating of 8 or very close to that, and the Apame is like just right under 7. Your normal wooden box is an R rating of 1, a 3/4 inch average box. So the Apame is really tough. A lot of people told me, man, that plastic's going to fall apart. Of course, I've only had it a year, but so far that thing seems really, really tough. And ow, I think I just cut myself. Let's see here. Bonnie Joseph, I saw her on here just a second ago. So if you're still on here, thank you so much, Bonnie. You really didn't have to. I didn't know you were going to, but she sent us this really neat tool right here. And I was looking into getting one. I just hadn't bit the bullet yet. And this goes inside your hive and it butts up against the wall, and you have a frame here, and it fits around onto your frame rest like a frame does. And it's a queen excluder, so you can keep that queen on one frame. We've talked about this with let's see if I've got it in here. There's just too much bee stuff around here, I'm telling you. It's not in here, but I showed it a few live chats ago, and there was a plastic one that you wrap, kind of cover the frame in. But this is going to be important for anyone who wants to do a brood break. What you can do is, instead of just putting that queen in a cage, you can put her on a frame that's completely drawn, preferably, but has no brood in it at all. And you stick her back on this up against the wall, and she can't get out of that. Over time, the rest of these frames, all the brood's going to emerge out of that, and you're going to get more mite exposure. The problem is, once this frame in here gets capped, you're going to want to pull that, put the queen on a new frame, and repeat the process. This is good because the queen keeps laying. She keeps producing the pheromones, so it's not quite as rough on the colony. But you can pull that frame out, then you can make a split with it, especially off of multiple colonies. So you basically have designated capped frames in your colony. Say if you're running 5 of these. So you take those 5 frames and you stick them in a new hive, put a queen in there. And you keep that queen caged. And you let all that brood hatch out. And then you basically are making over time all of your colonies broodless for a short period to where you can get good mite kill. One of the best ways to do it. It's a little labor intensive, but that's why we're going to do this experimental yard, to see how effective it is and what it takes to be successful consistently. And we're going to be toying with this, not just this year, but down the road, because this is the biggest issue in beekeeping. But thank you, Bonnie Joseph, so much for that. Oh, and she got this from Blue Sky Bee Supply. So they also donated those polystyrene hives to our channel. So they've got some cool stuff up there, stuff I haven't seen before. Let's see here. All right. I missed something up here. I know I did. Hey, Christian, thank you so much for donating to our experimental yard. If you have any questions, leave them below, and we appreciated getting to meet you a while back. So Matthew brought up Jono's Easy Vap, and that's something I've been meaning to address. John Oliver is no longer making his vaporizers. He really just started to do them for himself, and then he gave people the plans freely on BeeSource to where people could make their own. But most people just wanted him to make them, so he started doing it. And I've calculated the labor and the stuff that would take to. I don't know everything, but he wasn't making much off of those vaporizers. And he said he did over 3,000, and he's done. He's done enough, and other people are kind of picking up the mantle. There's some other suppliers out there. One of them we're fixing to do a video on, called Lorab Bees, and it is a nice vaporizer. It's slightly more expensive, but it is stronger built and has more wattage as well. So be watching out for that video if you need a good vaporizer. I've been using it. I like to test them out first. Byron says, Can you put more honey in this? That would be a good t-shirt, actually. It's Byron. I always get Brian and Byron confused. How does one avoid American foul brood? Well, there's two ways. American foul brood is a scary disease. I've never had it. It can be spread from another beekeeper, you purchasing equipment. It's spore forming, and those spores. Let's see it. I can't remember the number. It was like 30, 60 spores or something like that. It's all it takes to contaminate a hive and get it started in a new one. And just one pupae or larvae that has the American foul brood like has millions of spores, if I remember right. So it's very easy if you have a robber bee going in there to get it. There are a lot of different ways that people go about eliminating this. Some people put antibiotics in there, which really is just putting a Band-Aid on a artery wound, in my opinion. And then some people shake them out and remove all and burn all of the combs and stuff. And some people just kill the hive outright and burn the equipment. That's the law in Tennessee. And for once, I agree with them on that. I really think American foul brood is something that has to be dealt with extreme prejudice. So buying equipment. Also, the other way I was going to talk about is long-term old combs, really old combs. It was common practice to keep combs for 30, 40 years back in the day. That's not really healthy. There's a balance there, though. I really feel like a decade is a comb's life for my operation. Over time, we're going to shorten that down a little bit just because we're selling so many nukes off. But I have no problem using combs that are 8, 9, 10 years old. But the longer the combs last, there is a higher chance of developing enough spores to cause issues. But I mean, I have combs that are like 16, 17 or so years old. Actually, I got some that are a little older than that now. And bees are doing great. So I don't worry about that one too much. Just don't keep them for 20 to 30 years. Surely you can draw out enough foundation to replace it in that amount of time. Let's see. Yeah, Laura B's cups do match John. So if you already have a John Oliver vaporizer, then yeah, that'll exchange just fine. So Brian Reese asked, do you think you could use that new excluder for queen rearing to get 4-day larvae? And yeah, you could. That's a good point. That's something I totally forgot to mention. There's actually some other methods of using excluders as well. They're a little different than this one, but the principle is the same. And you can basically stick a queen on a nice comb that is drawn. If you do that, I recommend that you don't drop in a comb that has only had honey put into it. Queens really prefer combs that have had a little brood raised in them. It's different. If the bees are drawing out brand new foundation and they're making that new wax, she'll go through there and just draw, just lay that thing up. But this is just my experience. I don't know why. Maybe it's just my bees, but I doubt it. If I take a brood comb that's been laid in, she'll go right to it. If they're drawing out some new foundation, she'll go right to it and start laying into it, even before it's completely drawn all the way out. But if I take a comb that had only ever been used for honey production and I drop that in there, she's a little more hesitant to use that. I don't know why that is. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know why. But if you're going to use it for that, I just suggest that you use a comb that's had some brood in it before. I think it would be better for you. It is very difficult, Michael, to graft from light colored comb. And I ordered some foundations last year and forgot to specify that I wanted black foundation, plastic foundation, and I ended up getting yellow. Ooh, you want to talk about fun to graft out of. So that was a fail. I'm excited to try the double screen board that I got from the conference. Bob and Kent both spoke about them, so I picked a couple up. Well, don't forget about me. I didn't speak about them at the conference. Actually, I didn't speak much for a change. But, when you got guys like Kent and, Bob and, Ian Stepler, sometimes it's time for me just to shut up and listen. I really enjoy sitting back and listening quite a bit. Ah, Michael said I meant from combs with no cocoons, and that can be super helpful too. Especially depends. Some of the tools are really bad with cocoons. But yeah, you get down in there and you're trying to graft that larvae, and sometimes the cocoon wants to come on up with it. It's always best to make sure that the bees are in a healthy state, because if they have a nice pool of jelly underneath that larvae, it makes it so much easier. There needs to be ample nutrition from start to finish. If anything, there needs to be more than enough. And when I look at these giant cells that we like to raise compared to some that are just slightly inferior, we get good queens out of the other ones because they're really not that much inferior, but they're not quite drawn as long. And instead of having a bunch of leftover royal jelly in the cup, there's a very little left over. I like to see excess royal jelly if possible, but sometimes I wonder if we in the attempt to make the best queen, sometimes they end up wasting some of it. And I think they do, but it's good to err on the side of too well of a fed queen. But just make sure that you're from start to finish. Again, like I've said before, the grafting scares people, but I feel like after a little while, you're going to get that pretty easily. It's mostly the starter, not setting up the starter right, not enough nurse bees, enough nutrition, all that kind of stuff. Let's see here. How early in the year do you start splitting your hives? The earliest I've ever split my hives was March 1st, and that was really pushing it. So a little earlier than I would normally do it. But I had a friend of mine give me some queens from Hawaii, and I had to do something with them. And hey, the splits worked out great. It was 39 degrees when I made those splits, but you had to be fast and you had to know exactly what you were doing. And thankfully, Laurel did, and I was able to help her. But typically, I'll make splits somewhere around, mm, you know, late March, something like that. Usually don't like to start making splits before I start raising queens. You can buy queens. That'll speed it up a little bit. Hey, B Lord, thank you so much. How's it going there in Poland? Do you guys frozen over? Let's see here. Laurel's having to drop a band hammer. Just give her a second. Oh, Laurel. Oh, they couldn't see it. Okay. B Lord says it's cold. Well, it's pretty cold here today. I think we're gonna get maybe to freezing tonight. All right. Do slotted boards work? I assume you're talking about the slatted bottom boards. Is that what you're talking about, Warren? And if that they're typically used, from what I understand, to help decongest the brood nest and also help get some ventilation through the hive. And there are some people, especially more old school beekeepers, that really love those things. I've never used one, so I cannot speculate on that. A lot of people do the screen bottom boards these days. It's really a matter of preference. There's the emery shim, there's Snellgrove double screen boards. There's so many techniques. I think that's what makes beekeeping cool. I mean, look at what Michael Palmer does up there in Vermont, and it's so different. A lot of people are starting to use that system now, but obviously that works for him. I've got several friends who are very successful who don't do anything like that. So the equipment side of things is, I think, where a lot of the fun and the magic happens. You can start figuring out what you want and what makes sense for you in your area, or just sometimes it doesn't even make sense. It's just what you want to do. And I like building equipment too. Hmm? Negative 32 Celsius. Goodness. Yeah, I already mentioned that. Yeah. Let's see here. Hey, Amanda, it was really good to meet you at the conference as well. It was a crazy blast. It was just, whew, it was intense. I learned a lot. I know I did. Hey, plain and simple. We appreciated that honey that you gave us, by the way. It was really great meeting you. Hey, see you later, Farmstead Smith. Take it easy up there in Oregon. Let's see. Well, Katie, I'm glad that you feel more confident. That was the entire reason for the conference. And a lot of people asked me why I chose the speakers that I did. And it was because they all were doers. And in the future, that's going to be the same recipe that we use for speakers. They are people who have boots on the ground. They're not people who speculate from an office. They're not people who are hobby beekeepers or smaller and who can't prove that what they do works. And it was interesting because, again, they don't do the same methods, but the fundamentals are the same. Bees are the same. They're as far as their characteristics typically. Now, there's variables within the genetics, but ultimately there's a similar programming that they have, the instincts that they have. Some are more stronger towards swarming. Some are more like Carney like that shrink back, and some are more like Italians where they like to eat like a bunch of teenagers. And so there are characteristics, but by and large, being a beekeeper, the fundamentals are very uniform. And so what I see Ian Stepler doing, Michael Palmer doing, Bob Benny doing, Kent Williams doing, what I see, Rick Sutton doing, and several other beekeepers who are professionals. Oh, there's a lot of similarities. Techniques, that's where it gets a little different. Hey, Ricky, thanks again for that horizontal hive. We'll be doing some more on that in the future. Great meeting you and your wife. Any foresight on the 2022 conference details? Well, first of all, if Michael Palmer's still on here and he's able to, I would, whether it's 2022 or 2023, he's always got an invitation to be a paid speaker at our event, and we'll take care of him. So maybe that might be somewhere down the road, hopefully for all of us. But it is the 7th and the 8th of January. We've already got the place booked. Already have a couple speakers locked down. We've got Bob Benny, we've got Ian Stepler live, not virtual this time, so he'll be there. So I can prep all my Canadian jokes before he gets there. It's going to be great. And we're looking at getting Larry Connor, the fella that writes all of those queen rearing essentials and all that kind of stuff. Now, he is a doctor, but one thing that I've seen a lot of his stuff is he's still really focused on doing. He's done a lot of things. He seems really involved. So I feel like he's kind of the exception to the professional beekeeper side, that he's kind of got a little bit more of the scientific approach without being like, whoo, too much science. So I think it'll be interesting to try that out. But it'll be the 7th and the 8th. Same location, Lebanon, Tennessee. It's going to be awesome. Even better. This was my first year, so I thought it went really good. It was what I wanted, but now we actually have a model that we can base off of. What are we going to do to make it even better next year? Yeah, Michael, I'll be in touch with you. And if that virus has been, neutralized or not as big of an issue, we will get it figured out, and we'll make sure we take good care of you down here. And hopefully I can arrange the weather to keep it around 50s or something like that. Sometimes we get 50s or 60s in January. Yeah, Laura Bees, you come and bring some of those vaporizers. That'd be awesome. Brian Reese, take my money. Uh, Did Laurel make your chair cover? No, this is actually a blanket that her sister gave to me. So everyone seems to think that for Christmas and birthdays that all I want in life anymore is beekeeping related stuff, which this is a nice blanket. And I think I do like it, but it seems like it's like Christmas, like here's a bee shirt, here's a bee hat, here's this bee, here's this thing. Oh, you don't have one of these honey jars, do you? Oh. And I'm just like, I like other stuff besides beekeeping. All right. At this point, I'd like to even get a shirt that's not bees. It's hilarious. I really like it. Bonnie Joseph, thanks for that feedback. I talked to Larry Connor on the phone, and he seemed like he would be a good speaker, and be helpful. And that's our blueprint for this conference. We don't get fancy. What can we do? Who can we get to meet the needs that we have? And if they don't fall into that model, then we don't bring them out. It's really that simple. And it wasn't just for you all, to be honest, as well. I really wanted to help you all, but when I bring people like Michael in and Bob Benny or whoever I can get, I mean, these people are the elite beekeepers of our time, and that's who you need to learn from. You don't learn from the bums. You learn from the best if you want to be better. And so I learned a lot while I was there too, is what I was going to say. I took Bob Benny out to dinner and talked to Ken a lot and a couple of the other guys. And man, so many years of experience with Bob Benny. I just really enjoy listening to him talk about, beekeeping over the last 4 or so decades. He keeps getting on to me for saying how old he is, but I see that as it's awesome. It's really awesome. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for coming on out. And you need to think about making some more YouTube videos. We would love them. Hey, Ann, thank you so much for the $5 donation. We really appreciate you. And that looks like it's a burro or a donkey on your little picture there. They have some wild ones in Hawaii. They have wild goats, wild donkeys, and wild chickens and pigs everywhere because there's not a whole lot of native predators. And I think originally a lot of them, they brought them over as gifts to the Hawaiian people, and they loved them, and they just went all over the place because I mean, there's wild coconuts and papayas and all kinds of things dropping year round. It seems like over there, so there's plenty of food for a lot of those things. We did film the conference, but some of the footage wasn't so good. And Brian, I'm getting a lot of negative feedback from people who don't like the fact that we even held the conference. So it's not that we won't release it. It just takes a lot of time to edit 20 something hours of footage. And right after the conference, we went to Hawaii. So I haven't had a chance to even fool with that. And then, of course, we did that conference this year and the Hawaiian trip. So that was like a month of labor between Laurel and I, or more really, probably a month and a half's worth of labor. And so we're behind on several things around here at the farm. So we're just having a hard time finding time for a lot of things. But we will do our best to get it. What's your favorite joinery joint for heavy honey supers? Hey, whatever I can get that's built decent and cheap. Not cheap in build, but money wise. Say what? Inexpensive, yeah. So you have the rabbit joint, and I built hundreds of those boxes. And then you have the box joint, the finger joint, or whatever, and those work good. But honestly, if they're both tight fitting, if the rabbit joint is glued and you put maybe a screw or two in there and staple it, that's going to work great. Just seal it really good with some paint. Good to go. So it all depends on how it's stuck together. And I like both of them. And if I can get a better price on one or the other, I will go for that one. Let's see. What's your experience wintering bees on double screen boards? Well, Bee Lord, I've only done it for a couple of years, but I really like it. And it's not always needed, but if you have a little colony that's still a nice little healthy 3 or 4 frame colony, and you have a really nice powerful one that you can put it on top, I think it's really helpful. It helps. I don't really personally see a lot of like help in January in those months when the bees aren't trying to brood, but it's when they commit to that brood rearing and they need as much thermal heat as possible to help them raise that brood. And even if they can just help them raise a little bit more brood, that just it gives them a little bit more of a head start, and they take off a lot faster with that extra additional heat. Hey, Larry Lees, thanks so much. It was fun meeting you. I really appreciate the donation again and for coming to our conference. It was a lot of fun. Now you've got me as a friend. You can drop Rich because he's kind of a bum, but no, Rich is great. Rich is great. But hey, thanks for flying all the way out from the other side of the country. That was awesome. Hey, David, I haven't done any videos on pros and cons of clipping the wings on queens. It's not a practice that I've ever actually engaged in myself. I feel like if my colony is going to swarm, then even if I clip the queen's wing, what's going to happen is sometimes they will actually doesn't sometimes they stay with her, but sometimes they'll actually leave her, or she'll fall on the ground and the swarm will fall on the ground. And I can't check all of my bee yards all the time anyways. But even if they all decide to come back and you lose that queen, so they're all back in the hive, you've lost your queen, and then they've got all those queen cells. Once those queen cells emerge and you have virgins, now you have bunches of queens, and they're going to take off in a handful of days after. So I don't really engage in clipping the queen's wings, but I would say that there's other management strategies that are better than having to resort to that. Not, I'm not one of those people that say that, oh man, you're evil if you do that. Just I don't like it, and I don't think it's going to be super helpful to me. Let's see. Let's see here. Oh, I missed it. Thank you and the other beekeepers. Trying to. All right, that's awesome. Awesome. Bees doing good. That's what we like to hear. Hey, Chip. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate the donation so much. Kamon, when will you begin accepting orders for nukes and queens? That is a great question, Joe. Now that I'm back for Hawaii, I'm asking myself the same thing. And what I'm trying to decide right now is if I'm going to primarily focus on queen production and just do a few nukes, or just focus on doing a couple hundred nukes and very little queens. And honey production, obviously, as well, and things. I've just got to kind of figure out, things have been changing quite a bit. This experimental yard is going to take a lot of labor. There's a lot of YouTube videos that I want to do as well. I want to produce as much for you all as possible within my means. But I'm just trying to figure out if I want to shoot for like a bunch of queens this year and try to get the genetics out, or if I just want to focus on a handful of nukes instead. So I say handful, a few hundred. Maybe 250, 300 and some queens, maybe 1,000 queens and 100 nukes, maybe. That's kind of what I'm looking at this year. The nice thing is because of the YouTube channel, I don't really have to worry about advertising quickly. So I haven't been in any rush to do it. And so I don't feel a lot of pressure. I got to figure a few things out. I'm ordering all of my stuff in. I'm working on my extraction room. I've got that new bottling tank. I've got to get it wired in. I say I've got to. Laurel's the electrician around here, so she's got to rig the 220 up into the fuse box. Yes, it is a fuse box, so we're gonna have to figure that out. And we'll be showing you a video of that. Dayton has really nice extraction stuff. I really like all my extraction stuff from Dayton. Well, Joe, I will let you know when that becomes available, and we will try to get you taken care of. So Kamon, I've got hundreds of assassin flies eating my bees in the summer. What is the method to get rid of them? Say what? Yeah, it's really a big problem. It is. I kill so many of those things. I actually had someone get on to me in one of my YouTube videos. I smacked one and they're like, hey, leave those things alone. Nature's got to eat as well, and all that stuff. And first of all, I'm nature too. And I just opened up a can of kick butt on that natural robber fly. Laurel's shaking her head. It's a circle of life. And what happens when you have a lot of bees in an area, you are promoting a lot of things. You're promoting better seed production on flowering plants, but you're also promoting more pests. You're giving an ideal situation for robber flies. The only thing I've ever found to work for me is to swat them. And you'll never get them all, but I figured, I probably kill 20 or 30 of them a year. And Laurel kills several as well. So we take them down a notch, try not to get them let them get too high. But I don't know of any other method to deal with those things. They're fast and they love bees. I mean, they're Bees are, when healthy, are extremely nutritious. Yes, I've totally left Hawaii. It was an awesome trip. It was a blast, and I really appreciate our sponsor from Hawaii, who is David at Good Job Bees. They produce the most pure Kiave honey likely in the world, definitely in Hawaii. It is really nice. And our sponsors for the experimental yard, if you want to know what it takes to become a sponsor and those people, I really appreciate them because Apame and Good Job Bees have all donated either in product or in monetary value over $1,000 to the experimental yard. So I really appreciate Apame and Good Job Bees. What is the bait you use for your swarm boxes and when do you set them out? I typically use either lemongrass or swarm commander, whichever I can get cheaper. Also, you need to use, if you have it, propolis. You need to use some beeswax if you have it. Those natural smells really help. If I had to choose between having an old comb in there and some propolis bits and even some dead bees that you might have had lying around, throw them in there, or having lemongrass and none of those brood combs or propolis, I would rather have the comb and that stuff. Now, it's better to have both, but that's just the way I look at it. See you later, Rob. Take it easy. How many medium supers does a first-year colony need on a single brooder? Well, if that colony is going full throttle and you have a decent honey flow, then I'm going to be throwing on, oh, goodness, if I was just doing medium supers on top of a single, I'm probably, if it's a good flow and a good colony, we're probably talking 5 or 6 minimum. Maybe 7 or 8. It depends on your flow. Also depends if you're going to get in there and pull off supers, extract them, and put them on. So it takes a good bit. But what another thing that you can do is you can put on a couple mediums, and if you don't have any more, you can put one at the very bottom with like 1 or 2 bait frames of comb and get them to start drawing that. And that's actually good because you need to get new combs, but also I believe part of the swarming impulse is drawing wax, keeping the brood nest clear, drawing wax. Obviously, it'll take a little bit from your honey crop, but I think it's worth it. Combs are gold. Combs really are gold. Kamon, how many hives do you limit your yards to? Well, most of them have 40 or 50. I have a few, like here at the house, that have well more than that, but typically 40 or 50. I'm actually contemplating going more 30 to 40, but I'm still going to be doing a little bit more research into that for sure. But I definitely think 30 is a good number. And in certain areas, my better bee yards, I keep around 50 there, and there are really ideal areas, and the bees do fantastic with that many hives there. Let's see. Do you have any experience, opinions, or thoughts regarding mite, biter, queen genetics? No personal experience. I do have opinions. I have lots of those. And Laurel's over there like, So there's a lot of bees that have come and gone, and I don't think these are a bad idea. If they can figure out how to make it work, even if it helps us eliminate some treatment, that's fantastic. I do have several friends who have used them, and let's face it, many of us are bad about this. I've been this way, and I really fight hard not to be this way because it's easy. You get something, you buy it, the whole thing. You take it hook, line, and sinker, and you think, man, these bees are great. And I had a friend that did this, and he bought the ankle biters or mite maulers, whatever. And he's like, these things, man, these hives look great. Look at all this honey I produced. I haven't treated them anything with oxalic acid, except oxalic acid, just a little bit. And they're great. These are real. This is the way. Mandalorian reference. Anyways, so they crashed the next year. Almost, probably 80% or more just completely crashed. And the other ones, they're kind of okay-ish hives. Very few that actually did great. And I think it wasn't fair to have that kind of expectation. But they were better, probably better than just your average Italian. So just be careful with them. I know a lot of people don't like to do the alcohol wash, but it really lets you know what's going on in the colonies. And that's why we do it. So the last question that I saw was, can I raise queens with only 4 hives? If there are 4 good hives, you totally can. I do it with a 5 ring nuke system, and you can totally make a handful of queens, 10 queens, whatever with that system. If you any of you who don't know, you can go to just our main YouTube channel page. You hit the playlist, and there are 20, 15, something like that, different areas where you can go and look at the queen range section or the small hive beetle section. But yeah, you can do it. Laura says, does Laura wear a leotard and a cape? She is your secret weapon. She's more like she is like a superhero, but I think almost more like an assassin. You don't ever see it coming. You don't things just happen and just like, what? Whoa, where'd that come from? Did Kamon do all that by himself? She's like, it was like she was never there. It's actually kind of scary. She's good with technology and I'm terrible. And so like back when I was driving a truck, I'd like go to Wendy's or something like that, or just, and she knows what I eat too. She knows what I like to eat. And she's like, so she'll text me, how was that burger? I'm like, how do you know what I just did? And she's like, it's 2019 or whatever it was, Kamon. You can do these things. I'm like, ah, it's not like she's bad about keeping tabs on me, but she's brilliant and well, she was okay. She's like, you were bad about not calling me often enough. And so that was my way of knowing you were still alive. Oh, the truth comes out. I forgot about that part. Yep, sniper. Is a frame with any amount of brood considered a brood frame? Is a frame with brood on both sides considered 2 frames? Hey Troy, actually you just consider if it's really full of brood, then that would just be one good frame of brood. You have capped brood, you have uncapped brood or a frame of larvae. As far as a frame with any amount of brood, it could be considered a brood frame, but if it's very little, then it's not very useful unless if it's mostly food with a little bit of brood, then you can throw that in there. But you typically, if you're making a split, you're going to need more than that. Yeah, my Cato, that's for sure. I'll explain it to you later. But yeah, she needs a Cato mask. Bruce H. Hey, good night, man. Let's see. I missed a question up here. How do you approach someone about placing a bee yard on their land and farm? I touched on this one earlier. I'll go into it in a little bit more detail. First of all, I talk to farmers. Farmers are used to splinters, barbed wire, getting kicked by cows, getting stung by things. They are usually more forgiving if your bees do cause problems. If you know somebody else, that's great. But typically, whenever I go for a bee yard, it's like 100% farmers. And I think it's a great thing. They also, I also say, here's $100 or 2 gallons of honey for yard rent every year. That's part of the deal. And they always go for the honey. They're have an invested interest in what I'm doing. That way, they're not getting they're not getting anything out of it. Like, why do I have this guy here? His bees are getting in my swimming pool, or I got stung by a bee once last year. Is it worth it? Oh yeah, I got 2 gallons of honey. That stuff is awesome. I also love approaching guys and gals who run farm co-ops or something farm related, 4-H, those type of people, because it can be a twofold thing. And this is what I do a lot of times. They not only let me put bees on their yard, I sell honey through their venues, whether it's the co-ops, 4-H, whatever. And now they're making a little bit of money off my honey as well, and they're selling it for me. So those people love my bees, let me tell you. Some of them are making a couple $1,000s a year off of reselling my honey. Win-win all the way around. But as far as approaching those people, network. Talk to people at co-ops. Again, UT Extension offices here in Tennessee. I try to be involved with agriculture, even if it's not beekeeping. And I talk a lot, so it makes it easy for me. Laurel's like, yep, amen. No, of course you don't talk like that. That's right. Was that better for you? But anyways, Let's see. 2 to 1 versus dry sugar for weak hives now in Tennessee. Moisture issues with 2 to 1. Ooh, what a tough subject. If you get some warm days, I'm not telling you what to do. I mean, dry is safer, but I would be okay with feeding some 2 to 1. A lot of people will say don't do it. It depends on how weak the colony is. If it's like 2 or 3 frames of bees, go dry. But if it's a decent sized cluster and they're just starving or need more food, then if I get a warm spell of a few days, then I'm going to feed them a little bit. What? What? Oh, okay. I get it. I get it. Yeah, 4-H beekeeping. A friend of mine is putting in well, he works a lot with kids, and that's another great way to, beekeeping is a great way to educate people. Honey is awesome. Bees are even more cool. Pollen's great, especially once this whole lockdown stuff gets gone. Then getting out there and educating kids and people in school, that's what we should be doing. We try to do a little bit of that. And that way we're educating new people. I was really excited at our conference to see a lot of young people. There was a good bit of people that were my age, some that were teenagers in their 20s. It was awesome. I've never been at a place where there were so many young beekeepers, and it's exciting. We need more of that. But also, when you do that, you're selling your honey and you're finding new bee yards. That's how I find a lot of those things. First time beekeeper, is Apame worth it? Well, it just all depends on what you want, really. It's just another type of tool. It is more expensive, so I'm not going to sell it to you that you've got to have it, because it is something to consider price point wise. One of the advantages of it, it is very durable. It already has feeders, it has a pollen trap, has a screen bottom board stuck into it. It's well ventilated. It's easy to move around. It's easy to lock it tight. There's been several beekeepers post about and show pictures of their Apame hives getting beat up by bears, but the bears still can't get into them because they're so heavy duty. Anybody that tells you those plastic hives aren't strong, the Apame hives are strong enough to withstand black bear attacks. So they're pretty tough. So that's something to consider. However, you can get wooden equipment, especially from the Amish, way cheaper, but you don't get pollen traps and feeders and all these other gadgets. So you've really got to break it down for you and see if it's something that you want. Plus, you're getting an insulated hive. So there's advantages and there's disadvantages. Hey, you can also get their pollen trap and bottom board, screen bottom board combo for $55. That's the cheapest pollen trap on the market. I love it. My favorite product last year. I'm fixing to do a video on it, and I believe they're going to give 10% off to everybody who goes through the video. So I will be updating folks on that. But if you're looking into pollen trapping, they're better than the Sundance pollen trap, and they don't rot, food grade and all that stuff. Hey, bees and bikinis. A little too cold for that this time of the year. But hey, bees are hopefully snug and warm. When making a mason jar feeder, do I poke the nail outside to in or inside to out? Does it matter? Ooh, I have never really thought about that. I've always poked it from the outside in. And like B Lord said, we really do appreciate the thumbs up, whether it's here or in the videos. There's a lot of things that you can do for free to help us out. Thumbs up, obviously subscribing, watching our videos like you're doing right now, even as painful as that can be at times. I'm also going through our Amazon link. We have an Apame link. We get free donations every time you go through those things if you're going to buy. So even if you're buying toilet paper during the pandemic, whatever it is, and you get that on Amazon, we go through our link, we still get a donation from that. It's pretty awesome. Or Audible links, all kinds of different things. We appreciate that. I've always done outside in, and that seems to work good for me. So I would assume that would be all right. I haven't sat down and thought about it, though. Sometimes you just do things and you don't really think about it much. It just seems easier that way. How do you deal with the allergic sting issue with the 4-H kids? Well, You can set up like they have a fella in Tennessee that has a screened room, and we typically, you can have waivers that are signed. Obviously, bee suits are a must. We always pick small, gentle hives that have a good history of being gentle. If I want to pick a hive that I and get and not get stung or not get people stung, I can almost do that with 99.9% certainty. Now that I've said that I'll get stung in the next video. However, I'm pretty consistent about it. You can really tell after you've worked with bees so long what the hive's behavior is like. A lot of it's how you get in there, how much you use smoke, and genetics. I raise my own genetics, so it's really helpful. But I've never had anybody stung while showing them a hive, and or even close. So I think that's a lot. But you have to have waivers or some type of protection, because you definitely don't want a kid's first day with around bees is getting zapped in the face. Can you feed pollen patties in Tennessee in February? Hey, Mike, we totally are doing pollen patty feeding in February. I usually start early February. That's right, Norm, as long as they're not bee weaver queens, that 4-H event. Those bee weaver queens chase you a quarter mile or more. Oh, my goodness, those things can be rough. They're not Africanized. No, no. Anyways, but Mike, yeah, you can feed pollen patties in February. Our maple pollens usually come in early to mid-February. It's a great time to start feeding pollen patties if you're going to do it. It just smooths out the nutritional gaps between maple pollen flows to dandelions to henbit, dead nettle, and just kind of fills in the gaps. Some pollens aren't a complete food source for the bees by themselves. So then there needs to be multiple types of pollens. And if something happens to that pollen due to the weather, that pollen patty fills in that gap, keeps those bees smoothly going forward. Hey, Don, so you could use that syrup in a frame feeder, but it needs to stay warm. If you were to feed that like during cool times of the year where it could get down in the 40s or even upper 30s or even below lower than that, that syrup's going to be so cold, and the bees don't want to take that thick syrup cold. And they also, if they fall in it, it's so thick and cold, their body temperature lowers so fast they'll drown. And if you were to feed that same syrup to them and it's 70 degrees or 60 degrees, they just hop right back on out of there. So I would prefer, Don, that you watered it down just a little bit. You can mix it with a little bit of warm water, and the bees will actually take it down faster. It'll be more beneficial to them. And as long as that's what you want to do, then that would be great. I think it'd be better. But a lot of times when bees drown, it's because they're sick, they're new to the hive. You shake in a package, you throw in a swarm, and their pheromones haven't locked them in. They're running all over the place, figuring out where they're at, because packages and new swarms are bad about that. You throw an open frame feeder in there, and they go and they fall in there, and they fall on each other, and they drown because of that. If you'd have stuck that same frame feeder in that package or swarm 3, 4, 5 days later when they're locked in, totally different. Totally different scenario. The other time that they'll drown is when they're virus ridden, high mite loads, and they're sickly and they're too weak to pull themselves out. The only other time that I've had drowning issues in my frame feeders is when the syrup gets crazy cold and it's thick, and they'll fall in there and just lowers their body temperature so fast they drown. But I make sure none of those elements are in play, and my frame feeders work great. Don't drown hardly any bees. But it's a more sensitive tool than some of the other feeders. If you're wanting to prevent drowning, bucket feeders like Bob Benny uses, I've got a handful of them, like Ian uses as well. They're nice. Yeah, bee weaver queens are very hostile. They might be mite resistant. That's because they must hate everything, including me. Hey, John Tanner, we really appreciated you being there. We appreciated all the stuff that you donated as well. Really appreciate that. How do you get your syrup can set up for packages? Where do you get machines to sell cans? Hey, Pink Elephant Apiaries, I actually don't do packages. Never have. I'm not saying that I never will, but we just do nucleus colonies and queens. Bob Benny probably knows more about that. I don't know if he makes them himself. I imagine more than likely you buy those cans and then you just puncture a couple holes in them and plop them in. I just can't see it be worth his time to actually fool with that himself. But I've been wrong before. Bob's an incredible guy. What methods do you use to manage small hive beetles? The Dynamax towels work pretty good. You can use beetle blasters. Nothing gets rid of them all the way. Honestly, I don't really do a whole lot. The best thing you can do is keep your bees strong and then have a trap like that in there to kind of help keep the numbers low. Keep bee populations high, small hive beetle populations low, and you learn to live with it. Hello from Texas. What type of queen breeding nukes would you recommend? Did you find the 5-frame queen breeding nukes in Hawaii to be efficient, or would you prefer the styrofoam queen breeding nukes? I really don't like those little mini nukes, if that's what you're talking about. That same guy, Zach, tried those out as well, those little polystyrene mini nukes. And the really little ones, the baby ones, I don't like them. He didn't like them. Don't waste your money is my opinion and his, but some people use them. Some big professional guys, they like them. So I think they're too big of a pain. His 5-way nukes work very well for him, but personally, I like my 3-way mating nukes, and it's just a deep box that has 2 division boards in it, and then 3 on one side, 3 in the middle, and 3 on the left side. I like this for multiple reasons. One, it gives me more options. I really hate 2 framers. They work, but it's so easy for them to fill that up and swarm out. They just outgrow it too quickly. So 3 frames gives me more. Then on top of that, the way that I make mine, I make an additional groove where I can take out both divisions, put one in the middle, and I've got a 5-frame nuke on both sides. So mine's a little bit more multifaceted, but 2-frame, 3-frame, both work. I prefer the 3 frames myself. It's nice. It's universal. It's quick to make them up. It's quick to break them down. It's all deep frames. Very handy. Love it. What do you find is the best method to build bees up from 6 frames to a single deep in spring? A 10 frame. So are you talking like you have a 6-frame hive or you have just 6 frames of a cluster and you're trying to build it up to a 10 frame? Because if you're just transitioning the 6 into the 10, that works. Bees need a few things to grow. They don't need to be, diseased, need parasites. They need nutrition. They need a good queen. If you got all those things going and they have all those things, they're going to fill up that 10 frame, and then they're going to fill up another 10 frame pretty quickly. Healthy bees grow good in spring as long as they have the nutritional requirements to do so. Yeah, hive. So, if you have a 6-frame hive, just once it really is filled that out, and you have about 3 frames to 4 frames of about 3 frames of brood in that 6-frame hive, just plug it over into a 10-frame box and just move the 6-frame away and just put the 10-frame where it was, and that'll work just fine. Yeah, I really think it'd be worth your money and your time. Don't worry, be happy. Because the polystyrenes are pretty expensive and they're super limited. They're very sensitive to absconding because they're so little. And I think you're going to enjoy you'll have better results with the other ones. They're much easier to run and much more multifaceted. How do you treat mites? 2 rounds oxalic acid vapor in winter. Then we either use Apivar or Apiguard in June, and then one or the other in late August. Keep them low all the time. Makes the bees healthy. Those mites and the viruses are the worst problem we have. Not even a close second. Do you reuse JZBZ cups? I have before, and they do work. If you clean them good, you'll get some queens, but they don't work quite as good as the new ones out of the bag. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it is. A lot of beekeepers feel the same way. We just keep hold of them for the most part, and we recycle them. take them to the landfill and the plastic recycling bin. Kamon, love the videos. What would you say is the biggest game changer in beekeeping that you wish was a thing when you started? Oh man, what a hard question. Not super hard, but there's a lot of things I'd like to see changed. But first of all, I wish we'd have had better access to information like we do now. And I'm not tooting my own horn here, but there's Bob, there's Ian, none of those guys. Michael Palmer wasn't even on YouTube when I started doing any of his videos. There was just such a dearth of practical, fundamental, real beekeeping. And it was just a bunch of nonsense. And there's still a lot of nonsense online that's going to cost you a lot of money if you listen to it. Usually if it's easy, then it doesn't work. And I mean, that saying's been around for a long time. So I wish that someone like that would have been more around and available for me. Bob Benny would have been great. Ian would have been great. They've been great. I mean, even now, even though I've done a lot over the years figuring things out myself, but they really have really helped take my game up further, and they're very nice and generous beekeepers and men. And the other thing is mites. We've so underestimated mites 17 years ago when I got into bees. We're still underestimating them, but we're starting to catch up a little bit. Everyone wanted to blame the cell phone towers. They still do. 5G network now. It used to be 4G network and cell phone towers and, crop circles and all kinds of different things. CCD. We still don't know what it is. We've blown hundreds of millions of dollars. It's because it's all gone in the wrong places. They should have been researching viruses more. And some of it did go to that, but most of it was wasted, I think. And more of it should have gone towards mites and understanding them. We got oxalic acid vapor over here. It was the silver bullet. And it's not as good as what they say it is. So there's a lot of things. I wish we'd have known more about mites like we do now. Back then, we didn't even know that they fed on the fat bodies. We thought that they were still feeding on the blood of the bee. Total game changer there on how we address and understand how damaging they are to the colonies. It's exciting, though. It's exciting. This conference was super exciting that we had earlier this year. I'm seeing more legitimate beekeepers and more smaller beekeepers looking in legitimate sources. And I think there's always been the demand, but there's actually a few people meeting the demand now. And I think there's going to be a big change in the next 10, 15 years, and there's going to be more successful beekeepers than there has been in a while. I'm not talking thousands of colony beekeepers. I'm talking about successful beekeepers that are running 5, 15, 20, 50 hives, and in between all those numbers. And this is going to be great for the industry. It's going to be great because the more there are, the more real honey is being sold, the more people hear about beekeeping, more people get into it, more people buy nukes, more people buy honey, more people buy equipment. It is going to help everybody out. Some people get concerned with my videos and Ian's and Bob's, like we're going to actually affect the market because people are going to keep their bees alive over time. And it's going to hurt guys like myself because it's going to hurt the nuke industry. No, it's not. The beekeeping industry will just get better. And the more educated we all are, the better we will be. So I'm excited about the future. And maybe it's wishful thinking, but, I don't care. I guess I just don't care. Best way to raise 10 to 20 queens without a bunch of equipment. Looking to start grafting this year. So a 5-frame nuke is great. Grafting, you can get a Chinese grafting tool. We've got some on our Amazon link, or you can just find them on Amazon. You get like a pack of 10 for $8 or something like that. That could last you many, many years. Very cheap. You get some JZBZ cups. They're not, you can get a bunch for, just like $10, a ton of them. You got your 5-frame nuke box. You've already got your bees, hopefully at your house. And you need a grafting frame. So you're talking just a handful of dollars here. 1 or 2 queens is going to pay for that investment. A lot of the things like the grafting frame and the grafting tools are going to get years out of. That 5-frame nuke method that I've got on YouTube is awesome for that. And it's very low cost. And you will be able to raise the queens that you need for your operation with that. You can totally raise 100 queens with that if you run it a little more intensively. Mark, let's see. What type of splitting do you recommend to grow your amount of hives the fastest? I really like my method, and I say my method. It's a method that came around to liking. I'm sure somebody else was doing it 100 years ago. Splitting is pretty much the same wherever you go. I like a good frame of capped brood, a frame of larvae with the adhering bees on there. The queen is left in the original colony, the old queen. And I'm going to take a frame of food, bee bread, and honey. And then I'm going to shake another frame or two of bees in there that are nurse bees. And because there's going to be some drift that goes back to the original location, we've got to make sure we have good bee coverage on those frames. If you don't have good bee coverage, then they can't feed the larvae good enough, and the bees are going backwards. When the bees go backwards, it's almost as dynamic as when the bees are going forwards healthy. It's not good. So we need, if anything, we need more bees to the combs. You need extra bees to be able to patrol, can keep small hive beetles from being a problem, to make sure the larvae are fed. And once they get that first round of brood out of that capped brood that you put in, they're going to take off like a rocket as long as that new queen you put in there is good. And as you stick a mated queen in there, they'll take off. Give them a little bit of thin feed, 1-to-1, maybe even a little bit thinner than that. And that way you're not backfilling the combs, but you're still stimulating them. Hopefully there's still some pollen coming in. And even if there is some pollen and nectar coming in and your big colonies are kicking butt, you still need to feed those young colonies a little bit, even during a flow. Might not be a lot, but especially that first week or two, give them some, because what have you done when you make that new split from that double deep or whatever it is? You have now created a hive, a new split with no forager bees. And they'll turn some of them into forager bees, but not enough. So you've got a nice bunch of nurse bees in there, but no forager bees. So they need a little incoming nutrition. Even if there's a lot out there, they don't have enough bees to access it. So it might take them a couple weeks to get a decent amount of foragers. Once all that nurse population in there that you have turns into forager bees, now you're in good shape. But as far as splitting, I like that method. Couple frames of brood, frame of food, good new queen in there. Give them a little feed. If you have drawn combs, they'll go even faster. I like that method quite a bit for myself. And a lot of beekeepers use it. Is our Notre Dame fan on tonight? I don't know if we have any Notre Dame or Ohio State fans on that. We probably do. You can be a beekeeper and be an Ohio State Buckeyes fan, and I guess an Alabama fan too. We will try not to rub it in too much. It's an embarrassment of riches for us at Alabama right now. Let's win more national championship. What am I? Let's see. The problem with putting a small frame nuke and letting them make their own queen is a lot of times they'll be inferior. If they're starting from a larvae, the nutrition won't be enough. The queens will be smaller. Maybe they didn't get enough royal jelly. If there's enough nurse bees and enough nutrition, it's possible. But plus you have to wait that long period of time. So to me, it's a high risk situation. And it's not that you can't do that. I just like getting, high percentage of successful takes. What was it? No, I don't want to talk about that. I've talked about that so many times, it's not even funny. Can an entry feeder for a nuke be okay? I use on a full colony, but not on a nuke. So I think that's what that's saying. It can be, but it also can be a problem if there's no natural nectar and you have an entrance feeder or even a feeder that's accessible to other colonies on a little nucleus colony. They can get robbed out and bullied by bigger colonies. Nature is very rough on weak colonies, and other bees are also part of the natural cycle. They'll come in there and they'll wipe out a little colony if they can and get their resources. So I would be very careful with those entrance feeders. In spring, they usually work really good here because there's a little bit of a flow going on. So the other colonies, the big ones, are going out and fooling around with the real stuff. and then the little colony can take it in. But if I did that in late June, July, or August, man, they'd get mobbed with an entrance feeder. So just be careful if you decide to go that route. Delayed release of a queen in the split. I've done that, and I do that sometimes to get a complete brood break, and that way I can hit them with oxalic acid vapor and get a good mite control. Definitely don't use the oxalic acid vapor when there's a virgin in there. Don't use oxalic acid vapor while the queen is being introduced. What I like to do is cage the queen for a little while, come back a few days later if I'm trying to get a complete brood break, and then release the queen. You got to make sure that they haven't raised any cells, because sometimes they will, and you don't want them letting a virgin be raised and kill your mated queen. Sometimes that can happen. But then you want to let that queen lay for a day or two. Once she starts laying, they love her. They love that queen. And then you can do that oxalic acid vapor treatment and you're fine. But if you'd done that before she started laying, they actually might kill her, because the pheromones are very different when you have a laying queen. Bees love a good laying queen. Yeah, I love that fire truck too, Jim. It is awesome. It's a 1983 Chevy big block 366, and it likes to drink, but a lot of people in Tennessee and Kentucky do. So, trucks included. I don't know enough about Saskatraz bees, Brian. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on them. The genetics probably are good. The problem is with the ones that I received is the queens weren't very good. But I've tried a lot of things where the queens weren't very good and the second generation were way better. So I think a lot of it has to do with the commercial production of these bees. You know, they get these breeder queens and woo, yay, they're great breeder queens, but you don't get to see it in the product that you get because they're not getting them mated good enough, or they're not giving them enough nutrition. They don't let them lay long enough, whatever it is. And on shipment, they just don't arrive like you would like. That's why I've gone to raising my own queens. That's why Ian Stapler raises most of his queens, or all of them maybe these days. You know, Bob raises queens. You know, Michael Palmer. And the operations I see that don't raise their queens, they usually buy queen cells. So at least they get the queen cells in, put them in their mating nukes. They go and mate with local drones, and you're not running through a production system that's really intensive, and you're getting better quality that way than buying a bunch of garbage commercial queens. I can't say strongly enough how disappointed I've always been. I've never had a good experience once, whether I was ordering 130 queens, whatever, from any of these commercial guys, whether they're from California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, wherever. Always disappointed, bad percentages, especially compared to what I can do here at home. So why would I do that to myself? All right. This thing's fixing to die on me, Laura. Yeah, well, I gotta get. Should I use oxalic acid on packages? If so, when after installing, then use strips. I usually like to wait till 10 days after installation on a package. The queen should be out and laying at that point. And what you can do to double check is you can go into that package, very light inspection, puff or two of smoke, pull out a frame or two, and have feed going in while this is going on, because you need them to draw that new foundation out or whatever, stimulate them. So have some feed. Feed always makes the bees feel a little bit better. They enjoy that. And then, you know, on day 10 after the package is installed, you should have some brood at that point if everything's good, but it won't be any capped brood. So all the Varroa mites should still be exposed. And then you can do your oxalic acid treatment as soon as you shut that hive up, and that will work really good. You're only supposed to do 1 gram to a deep box. I usually get, you know, a gram and a half in there. You didn't hear it from me. Maybe you did. I don't really care. In your opinion, is there any harm in using a screen top with a vent gap under the lid? Several people have had success with this ventilation system in PA. You know, especially in springtime, if it's really hot, that could be helpful, help maybe cool the colony down. I haven't had a lot of experience with that kind of stuff. There's so many things like that in beekeeping, so many, and it's not that any of them are bad, I just haven't experienced a lot of them, and so I have a hard time making a good opinion on that. Um, a lot of people like to put shims and stuff in, or ventilation help in summer. Isn't honey made from sugar bad? That is what you mean by feed them, right? Give the bees sugar. Honey made from sugar. Well, first of all, okay, here we go. Let's break this down. There's a lot of misconceptions about feeding bees cane sugar, that it's bad. It is not. It's actually more beneficial to the bees than it's not. There's a lot of lies out there in beekeeping, and that is one of them. You know, it's crazy. The people that'll tell you that essential oils is healthy for bees will tell you cane sugar is not. It's just it's a crazy world we live in. It's not as good as nectar. Now, we definitely don't want to get sugar into our honey supply that we're going to be selling to our customers, because that's wrong. It's not honey. It's cane syrup. Now, people like us, if you drink a soda, especially one of the more natural ones, it's going to have cane syrup in it. So it's not like it's unhealthy for people, and it's not that it's actually unhealthy for bees. It's actually one of the best feeds for bees because cane sugar is just sucrose, and that's it. And it's emergency feed. And when you have young colonies, they are very similar to a newborn bottle calf that's mothered, maybe had twins or whatever. It won't take it. You've got to get nutrition to those colonies. There's a huge difference between colonies that are fed and not. So this is the closest thing to nectar as possible. And when there's protein coming in, glucose oxidase, I said that right. Woo, yay. Bob Benny's talks about this a lot. It's actually created, and this makes hydrogen peroxide. That's one of the things nectar does. So cane sugar is actually not only good at providing energy for the colony, it provides some hydrogen peroxide, which helps cleanse their guts. It helps cleanse the combs. It's really good for the bees. Really good for the bees. Now, nectar's better, but honey's not actually as good as nectar. And you could argue it's not as good as sugar. A lot of beekeepers, especially up north, find that bees overwinter a whole lot better on cane sugar syrup than they do on actual honey, because some honeys are inferior for bees to overwinter on. They have too many crystals, too much mineral content, and it can actually cause gut problems in wintertime. So one thing I really encourage all of you is to really don't read Beekeeping for Dummies and believe everything you hear, because guys like Bob Benny and Michael Palmer, they're doing algebra, and Beekeeping for Dummies is basic math at best. There we go. I'm messing up my words. Is that going to make the blooper reel? Anyways, so those young colonies really need it. Don't contaminate your honey. There's times when you should feed it, and there's times when you shouldn't. And if you don't have to, that's great. It's expensive. I don't like feeding, but we do use it as a tool, and it is a wonderful tool. It is a wonderful tool to help our bees when they need it. And every year is different. If you watch my videos this spring, this is the worst spring I've had in 17 years. We had so many days of rain. I was wearing long underwear in May. For us, that's crazy. Usually in May, we're sweating like crazy. When we got married in April, it was 94 degrees. I was wearing long underwear working bees in May. That was 2011. So every year is different. And this was a brutal spring for the bees. Last year, bee yards, we were pulling 2 deep supers of honey. We were feeding bees at the same time they were making honey the year before. So variables. I don't personally believe in the political climate change. I do believe that the climate does change, but I don't believe that we're fixing to burn up or anything like that. For all we know, as short-lived as humans are, and we haven't even been keeping good data for a couple centuries even. And so we don't know what the Earth does. We might be on a 1,000-year cycle, 10,000-year cycle. We have no idea. In the 70s, they predicted an ice age. There was people recently coming out that there was going to be an ice age upcoming shortly. I say baloney. Let's keep the rivers clean and all that kind of stuff. Let's take care of nature because we're part of it. But the politicians use climate change to bring in money and all kinds of crap. If a politician says it, the only thing that's good for is compost. All right. Wow. That really. And and I told Laurel this one wouldn't be as long. So, but seriously, I told her I'd do about an hour and a half, and it's been 2 hours. So we need to. Yeah, compost is great. Let's make all the politicians make it. That's what they need to do with all that money we're paying them. I would pay extra money to see that. All right. Political stuff aside, this has been an awesome live chat. I've really enjoyed the questions. We're going to have more upcoming, so stay tuned because we're all gearing towards getting ready for spring, new stuff. We've got a lot of new stuff to show you. It's a lot of stuff we haven't even begun to work on yet. Wow. It's really time to stop. But thanks for coming on. Thanks to everyone who was on here that came to our conference. We'll be having a video soon on a really cool wax rendering method that kind of like Ian Stepler's setup gives you that nice crumbly slum gum at the bottom without having to buy an expensive Finley wax melting system. So it's nice for smaller operations like us. We appreciate you guys very much, and we hope that you have a good, blessed rest of your week, which is, let's see, what about 3 more hours? So I hope that's the best 3 hours of your entire week. Thanks for watching our videos.